You're listening to the Uplevel Your Online Business Show, where wealth is empowering, purpose is crucial, and high vibes are non-negotiable. And now, here's your host, certified business coach and practical woo strategist, Sara J Loureiro.
Welcome back to another episode of the Uplevel Your Online Business Show. I'm really excited to be able to record this episode because it's really inspired by two very close friends of mine who are having a conversation with me on the beach about debt. And I really just hope that this inspires you to understand that debt is not bad. It's not a death sentence. And you can totally pay it off. And at the same time, it helps you to leverage so much more that you can benefit from in your future. So without further ado, let's get started, shall we? So the very first thing that I want to say to this is kind of like a caveat in that I'm not talking about my own personal debt. I am talking about two of my friends who have very much so inspired me, who are also business owners. And I just wanted to really record this and let you know about how amazing they are and how much they've been able to kind of like overcome things that have happened to them in an effort to inspire you, no matter how much debt that you have, or even if you don't have any debt and you're considering getting debt for your business, how, we all just kind of need to normalize that process a lot more, but also normalize our own personal responsibility within it. And so this episode comes inspired by basically just sitting on the beach with two of my friends. At some point in time last year, we were talking, having just a really, really great conversation about investments and about business and about life and about like doing things that we really want to do. And then that's when, they just kind of started talking about their own debts. And so what I learned from each one of them was that I think one of them was in around $70,000 of debt and the other one was in and around $60,000 of debt, I think a year or two prior. And what they were both basically saying was that they got themselves into this place because they just kind of kept on spending and spending and spending, and they weren't necessarily making enough to get on top of it. And it wasn't really until they started making more conscious choices and just like getting a hold on it and getting themselves out of victim mode. And they were able to pay this off within 1 or 2 years. And these weren't they weren't even making a lot of money. They were making around 6 figures a year, which I know for a lot of you is probably a lot of money. For a lot of you, it's probably like, oh yeah, that's totally normal. Hey, that's really cool that they could have done that. And one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about this is just to really and truly like normalize that, because before that conversation, I would have looked at someone who has that much amount owing in consumer debt, mainly in credit cards and personal loans and things like that. And I would have been like, oh my God, right? Like, how is that person ever going to get out of that? I would have felt sorry for them. I would have immediately felt scared for them because I would have thought like, oh my goodness, what are they going to do? Right? They can't possibly pay that off. They're never going to be able to pay that off, right? That's what people say. That's what people do when they take a look at other people's debts. It's like all of a sudden it's this really, really big, scary thing that we need to fear. And it was interesting because as we started talking about it, both of them were very, very neutral about the entire experience. And I think it's because they had done so much internal work around the amount and around how, they carried a lot of their own shame, but they actually were able to let go of their shame around their debt. And that's actually what allowed them to also pay it off, is just emotionally detach from what it is that they owed and just get really real with themselves and just get really honest with themselves. Some of it was from not having a job for long periods of time. I know one of my friends invested in a few certifications that she never really used. And so it would just kind of pack on. And they both developed a plan for themselves where they just really, really aggressively paid it off. And it really just inspired me to also understand what we're possible of as human beings when we put a lot of focus, discipline, and dedication into one thing. Because most of us, if we're not in debt, probably don't save $30,000 a year. But these women did. They saved $30,000 a year so that in 2 years, they paid off their debt completely. And It's just really puts things into perspective, because then when you think about, your next 10K business investment or your next 15K business investment or your next 5K business investment, and we think to ourselves like, oh my goodness, that this is so scary. Maybe it's money that you don't have. Maybe it's money that you have on a line of credit. Maybe it's your emergency savings that you're investing into your business. And I've been there. And also what I want to say about this is that you're going to survive it, and it's going to be okay. And it's probably going to be more than okay. You're probably going to either have an amazing breakthrough where you make all of it back and more, or you're going to learn something really valuable from it, and you're not going to be broken, and you don't have to be ashamed of yourself, because all you're doing is you're just borrowing money for something that you really, really want to try out. And I think the more that we neutralize that, and the more that we understand that it's there for us and not against us, the more that we can free ourselves from the stigmas of debt. And so when I first started my business, I didn't go into debt necessarily to start it. I had some emergency savings that were in my bank account, but hey, those savings were supposed to go for a house. They were supposed to go to a house, and instead they went for certification, and they went to a business coach. And I turned that certification and that business coaching investment into a multi-million-dollar empire. And had I not done that, and had I been like, oh, well, my business is not making money, so therefore I cannot invest in it, I wouldn't be here. I would still be at my 9 to 5, 7 years after, I've already been 7 years like full-time self-employed. And I would have still been there. I would have still been like doing this on the side. Maybe I would have quit it already, because it would have been way too much hustle for a part-time income. And I wouldn't have really been able to get much further. So I'm just so grateful that I was able to do that for myself. And a lot of people consider that debt even. They consider, oh, well, if it's not coming from my business, then I can't invest in my business. So if my business didn't generate this income, I can't invest in it. And I think we put really silly rules on ourselves in terms of what we can and cannot invest in order to get the life that we really want. And I always think back to this. I always think back to, well, let's say I had to take out a line of credit, or let's say I had to put these investments on my credit card. What would have happened to me? Would I have spiraled into a mass amount of debt? And I go back to thinking about when I first did my certification, when I first started getting clients. And, I would have made back my certification probably within the first year of yoga and wellness coaching. And my business coach, I made back that investment within the first month of working with her. And so that probably wouldn't have even incurred any interest. So maybe my certification would have incurred a little bit of interest, which I would have been able to pay off because of, still being able to work a 9 to 5 and having actual clients coming out of that certification. But I would have been fine. And I, could have put it on a credit card. I could have put it on a line of credit, and my outcome would have been the exact same. In fact, it might have even been better. My outcome may have even been better because I would have had a little bit more of a fire under my bum to make more money and to make it work quicker. But because I didn't have the fire under me, I allowed myself to go a little bit slower after I did my certification to be able to, make money. And so I always think back to that time when anyone comes to me and they're brand new and they're like, yeah, but I haven't made any money, so therefore I can't invest any money. And I'm like, oh, if you have that mentality, you're going to have a really, really hard time in your business because you just need to let go. You need to let go of all of the rules that you set for yourself, because all of those rules were made by a former version of yourself that was playing it safe, that always wanted to play it safe. But in entrepreneurship, you cannot play it safe. You need to take risks. You need to take leaps of faith. And sure, they don't have to be super risky. I mean, like your very first business investment doesn't need to be $20,000. It could be something much smaller than that. But when you take these risks and these leaps of faith, that's how you learn. That's how you put yourself into the deep end. And that's actually how you become someone different, where you create differently, when you think differently, when you're like, okay, now I did this. Now I'm committed to myself. Now I need to take things to the next level. And like I said in the beginning of this episode, with my friends who were able to pay off $60,000 in debt, they just really inspired me because it made me realize that, yeah, we can all learn from and really work our way up from, like bad things that happen in our lives. I've talked to women who've had terrible debt after divorces because, they didn't have anything. They didn't have like the proper assets when they divorced. And so they were left with nothing. And they had to rebuild their lives, and they had to rebuild their lives in single bedroom apartments where they were on one income. And yeah, that stuff is hard. But you know what? I also had a client who did all of that. I think she said she was in like $50,000 of debt. And now she's a multimillionaire because she got out of it. Because that specific aspect, that specific moment in time really made her into the woman that she needed to become in order to be the woman who had the focus, had the discipline to make more money and to keep it and to safeguard herself in her future. And so I hope that all these stories are inspiring you. I hope that if you're listening to this and you're in debt, or you're thinking about going into debt for your business and you're afraid of it and you're ashamed of it, I hope that this inspires you not to be afraid or ashamed. I hope that this inspires you to take the emotional charge out of everything that you're going through and just truly understand that, debt is just a loan that you're taking out, and it's going to come back to you tenfold, whether it's actually in the monetary amount in the time frame that you want it to, or if it's in the life lessons that you learn. And either way, you're going to be fine, and you're going to be more than fine. So think about it that way. If my two friends could pay off over $60,000 of debt in 1 or 2 years, you can do whatever it is that you're setting your mind to as well, right? I hope that this helps, you guys. Let me know how much you liked this episode. I'd love to hear your perspective on it. You can always find me at Sara without an H, J Loureiro, that's Loureiro, on Instagram. I'd love to hear from you. And thank you so much for listening, and I'll catch you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Uplevel Your Online Business Show. If you enjoy our show and would like the show notes and free goodies about how to grow your online coaching business, head over to sarajloureiro.com for more information. We hope you'll tune in next time.